I do like that.
All right.
So who are our,
So I'm going to go right here and start our meeting and welcome us. All right, everyone, welcome to the first official meeting. I don't know how many years coming and wishing this was for so many people in Lewis, but welcome to the first meeting for the subcommittee to form a tree ordinance, or to explore a tree ordinance, I should say. I am Deborah Evalds. I am the chairperson from the Lewis Planning Commission. The other members from the Lewis Planning Commission are Richard Ennis, who I do believe is joining us today, and I think live. So we'll just get started. And Joe Hockner, who is with us on Zoom, someplace, well, I don't know if I want to say much nicer than Lewis, because Lewis in July 4th week is pretty hard to beat, but he's elsewhere. I have formally invited two other members to join as ex officio members. As this is my first subcommittee, I'd like to kind of explain something to anyone who might be with us. Is anyone with us?
yep, you've got two people listening.
Okay, well, and for members of the press, is that all of these subcommittees have a structure which is LPC members are the voting members, but then they often have other ex officio members, and that's really important. So these members can contribute as much as they want, or I may open this a little broader and have some people just contribute their area of expertise. So first we have Marty Thompson, who is, I guess, officially the Parks and Recs tree
Commissioner.
You are the tree commissioner for Parks and Recs. So that's why Marty is on the commission, and that's important. We don't want to try to rewrite anything that we already have, and we do have some things in place. And Mary Linda Maddie, I've invited her to join because Mary Linda up in Fox Chapel, PA, had some experience with actually going out, examining trees, and instituting a tree ordinance. So she is a person who has actually worked with a street and private tree ordinance. And I think exploring other tree ordinances is going to be a huge part of this effort. The one thing I want to put out here to the public, and Aaron, if you cover us in the press, I'd love you to include this, is that Lewis has a tremendous amount of human resources. Just there's such a wealth of diversity, experience, and intelligence in this community. And if there are people who want to participate, I'd like to hear from them sooner than when it comes to review. For example, instead of just having people sit on a committee and attend every meeting, I know people are busy, and what I'd like to envision in this subcommittee is that when we're looking at trees, love to have arborists and people who are expert at trees come and do more of a working, workshops with us. Maybe they'll just participate in that one meeting, or maybe it'll be two meetings, but doing that. Also love to hear from people who have lived in other communities where there were tree ordinances or have special expertise in that area. If I'm missing anything, please chime in. That's my bigger vision with this. Also, just to start off today, kind of looking really, I don't want to say globally, but it's almost like locally, not globally to locally, more like locally down to micro. And starting off with, these kind of steps in the process, looking at our existing codes that apply to trees. And I'm going to start with that in a moment with Marty. Then deciding what we're going to address. Obviously, we've covered street trees. So there are some sticky issues here between public and private property, but I think the universal feeling for a long time of many people in this community has been we've got to protect what I would call our heritage trees. And so that's going to be, something that we're going to be spending a lot of time on, deciding what trees we're going to address and where. That's what we need to look at other codes for examples of. And we also need to, work within a parameter of what is legal and fair to homeowners or to business owners, to property owners, as well as being fair to all of us and preserving what we have here in Lewis. So that's going to be developing a scope. Then after we've developed that scope and figured out goals of what we want to address, I want to go early to the mayor and city council, throw it out to them, see what their thoughts. Are we working in the right direction? And then perhaps even do a community workshop at that point, early in, look for feedback. Then the job will be to actually develop the code. At that point, we're going to be having to clock billable hours because we'll have to bring in Mr. Mandalis, our counsel. But I think he's uniquely suited to this because he works with the city of Rehoboth too and knows what is working in that code and what areas of weakness are there. And I want to develop this so that it's both legal and enforceable. And that's really about it. I've spoken to Janelle and Marty in advance to see what we've got out there. First of all, we do have a tree ordinance, but it just addresses street trees. And that is chapter 177. And I've asked Marty to give an overview of that, as she is the person who knows it best. And then we also, in the new subdivision code, we have tree sections. And I've asked Janelle to also come up with a list of other things that we should look at, and perhaps we can tackle that today. So that's it. Does anyone have any input or questions as we move forward? Okay, on track? Okay, good. All right. Thank you, Marty. And I'm going to be following along. I also want to point out, if anyone is in the audience, it's pretty easy to find our street code. It's under Parks and Rec on the city website. And then you go to individual parks. Is that right?
Well, you go to Parks and Rec, and then within it, there's the tree program.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
So I think the easiest way for people to find the actual code is
the
to go
code.
to the city's website, and then under government, you can actually, there's the government tab, the fourth one down to the city code book, and then it has all the chapters, and then you're just looking for chapter 177. So that addresses the trees. That's probably the easiest way to find it.
Right.
And the other
code, yeah.
thing I wanted
The
to point
code.
out that was in there too is that we already have the start of an inventory with.
It's more than a start. But
Well,
I'll cover
start the-
that. You're covering
Okay,
things I'm going to
okay,
cover.
good. All
And it's
right,
not just street trees, it's all trees on city property.
Marty, I'm going to turn it over to you.
So we've been a tree city for 21 years now. And since I've been the tree commissioner, I've been between me and first Allison and now Janet, we put together the application every year. And in order to be a tree city that's operated by the Arbor Day Foundation, you have to have a tree border department, and that's our Parks and Rec Commission. You have to have a community tree ordinance, which is our chapter 40 and 177. And there's spending requirements and celebrating Arbor Day requirements. So our tree ordinance does meet the standards for becoming a tree city. So our tree ordinance it starts with chapter 40, which creates the Park and Rec Administration. And it gives the Park and Recreation Commission the responsibility for the urban forest as articulated in chapter 177. And then 177 covers our urban forest, meaning in this instance, it means city trees, trees on city property. It's the street trees, meaning street trees means different things to different people, but under our code, it means the trees between the sidewalk and the curb. So in other contexts, street trees can mean something else, but that's what it means to us, between the sidewalk and the curb. This also covers the trees in our city parks, the trees on the city hall ground. That's probably just about it, but basically any city property it covers. And chapter 177 includes basic requirements such as we have to maintain an inventory. We have that. We maintain the trees in a healthy and non-hazardous condition. We establish a diversity towards native tree species and age classes. We're not required to have all native trees, but there's an emphasis on natives. We assist others as they develop their own property. So I have actually taken questions from homeowners and other folks, HOAs and things, and help them as I could. Assist the planning commission and others. And then there's more details in there about how we plant trees and so on that we can go over later if we need to. We do maintain an inventory. The very first inventory, I'm told by the tree commissioner at the time, was just printed paper. That's what it was. That was in ancient days by comparison. The current inventory is Arborscope. It was done when John Feliciani was the tree commissioner. We got a grant to do it, and it was done by Bartlett Tree Experts, and it's now maintained on their platform. There's a link to it on our website.
I actually have it up, but I don't know how I could.
Bring it up.
Can you bring it up? Yeah. So this includes all the trees that are inventoried. I've inventoried, all the street trees are inventoried. All the trees in most of the parks are inventoried. Now in George H.P. Smith Park, they did not inventory 100% of the trees in the area around the pond. There's just too many, and a lot of them are small and not particularly valuable. And then in Great Marsh Park, we have just begun to do inventories. I've inventoried just a handful of the specimen trees there. We have some really nice, big native trees there.
And
They're wonderful.
that's a huge
wonderful.
job.
I don't think we'll ever inventory all of them, but I inventoried enough to give us a starting point for what we have.
And can I ask a question, or do you want me to
Sure.
save my questions till
No,
the
no, go
end?
ahead.
Is there criteria for, what trees you examine or count? Because, size, age, things like that, because I'm wondering how that could tie back into what we'll be doing in the future.
Well, there's no set criteria. The inventory for us, the way we use the inventory is to help us manage the trees. What needs pruning? When was it planted? What difficulties does it have? There's a number on it so that when we tell Bartlett we need to prune tree 112, they know they can find it. It's right there. And it's to help keep track of the trees. So a lot of it depends on how actively you're going to manage. I can't imagine we would actively manage every single tree in Great Marsh Park. There's too many of them. But we might actively manage a handful of specimen trees. I think that's possible. So I think that's part, when you're talking about inventorying trees on private property, we're going to have to decide what our criteria are going to be. Probably depending on whatever code restrictions we're going to come up with as far as size of trees that are involved, or, age, whatever, species, whatever the issue is. So for Arborscope now is, it was originally set up under a grant. We paid Bartlett to set it up. I now maintain it. I add trees when I plant them. I remove trees from the inventory when they are removed or come down. And it includes the location, scientific name, common name, and some other information about the trees. By the way,
I think I hear Joe. Is that correct?
I'm here.
You weren't asking a question?
No, it wasn't me. No.
so when it comes time to talk about the inventory, we can talk more about what inventories are available, what might be best suited for whatever we come up with. But I think inventory comes after we start setting standards or start talking about setting standards.
Yeah.
Because you have to decide what you need first before you decide what tool might be best to help us with that. I will also mention we have a tree canopy, we have a tree canopy resolution. We had one originally in 2011 that called for a 35% tree canopy. The last survey we had, which was, I think, in 2018. Anyway, it's done by satellite. We nearly met that. We have a new tree canopy resolution, which was adopted November 8th, 2021, which calls for an increase in tree canopy to 38%.
And so that is, I'm actually amazed, and that gives me some hope that we are that close. What was the last count, and
The last
what year
count
was it?
the last count was 34.2%. That was done by satellite. And when you look at the map, you see that we actually have a very large part of our square mileage is in beach where there are no trees.
Right.
So it's nice that the rest of our area has quite a few trees.
And what year was the 34%?
You know, and I have to look that up. It was done by the state, by satellite, and I want to say it was shortly before COVID hit. So it was like,
Yeah, I want to say
2018,
ballpark is
2019,
okay. Okay.
something like that. They're working on doing an update. And so hopefully that'll come out soon, and we'll see where we stand.
And who would request that update? Because I think that's really important for us to get a baseline. I worry that every time there's
So-
been development, I'm worried that our number is lower than 34%.
So it sounds
Now-
like, based on the information provided, that the state does it and they do it every so many years.
Well, actually, they hadn't done
and-
it for quite a long time, and then they developed a new satellite system, or they got hooked up with a new satellite system to do it. So hopefully, I'm hoping that we'll get updates more frequently now. But I will find out. I will call the state forester's office. We are closely connected with the state forestry office, mostly the urban and community forestry service. We've gotten many grants over the years from them. One of the grants helped us get the inventory in the beginning, and I've gotten a lot of grants for plant trees. We planted trees this past Arbor Day in April, and 25 new little baby trees in George H.P. Smith Park, and it was done in coordination with the Roots and Shoots teen group at the library. And they came in with their families, and we planted a lot of trees. It was great. So while I'm on that topic, let me just mention this. Our current code requires that our trees be of certain caliber when we plant them, and certain sizes. That's not what we did for the tree planting we just did when the teens came in and planted, because big 1.5-inch caliper trees, whatever, that just doesn't work with that kind of a group. So that's one of the things we need to be cautious about when you talk about how big a tree to plant, how close together to plant them and everything. I'm cautious about putting that kind of thing in code. Now, when we're telling private persons what to do, maybe you need that, but
Yeah, it's this is where I think we need a lot of expertise from the community,
Yeah.
because I know, for example, from my own personal experience, that I was lucky enough to grow up near some pretty amazing tree surgeons who my husband and I planted a lot of mature trees. Like when they were asked to take out trees, they would always keep them alive, and then we would amazingly get these 40-foot trees on our property.
oh my goodness.
But we knew that we were taking a gamble on that, and they probably only half of them would survive. Whereas if we were planting small trees, we would have a higher percentage rate, but we would never have, and we're talking about trees that came from the same community that, were appropriate for the environment, but still. Questions like that are things that I cannot answer. That if we start developing some standards, I know when we're in subdivision and we're, and giving people feedback on what kind of landscaping plans they want to see, we do give guidance, but, it might be good to develop this more.
I have a question, Marty.
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Do you define small, medium-sized trees, and what are your criteria to define them in the And
Code has it.
yes,
Yeah, the code, our code, and I'm trying to see what it is. And
is it by caliper or height or?
I have got it up here too. Would it be in definition?
it's a small tree shall not to exceed 15 to 20 feet in length, in height at maturity.
Here we-
Medium trees not to exceed 45 feet in height at maturity. Large trees exceeding 45 feet at maturity.
So there's no circumference, or it's diameter or circumference? What are
DDA,
usually
diameter breast height is normally.
with
yeah,
calipers?
Caliper. Well, it all depends on what you need the measurement for. It says here that all street trees shall conform to certain standards and shall be at least 1.25 to 2.5 inches diameter breast height and at least 8 to 10 foot tall when planted. I can tell you right now, we don't always follow that. Now, I think most of them are at least 1.25 inches. Some of them might be a little less than that, but they're not all 8 feet tall. And I think that's a standard that maybe isn't necessary. But that's the kind of thing that we can talk about.
Yeah,
Now, of course, one of the differences is when you're talking about the city planting the trees, we make the decisions versus us going out and telling other people to plant trees. You do have to have certain standards there because you don't necessarily want them to just put all little whips in the ground and nothing else.
In a row.
Depending on the circumstances, you might not.
Yeah, right.
yeah, and this is a city that I think more than I don't want to say any other down at the beach, but we are a city that aesthetics are important, as well as making sure that people plant trees that are healthy and going to last a long time. For example, I have my neighbors are no longer on this earth, but they have a line of Bradford trees that have been left behind, Bradford pears that a new homeowner has inherited, and I'm sure we'll try to
I think
care for, but one day they will fall.
the right tree, right place, right species, right place is really, really important. Just from my experience, I was a master gardener for 20 years before this, planted trees on my own property, other people's property, and then I've been doing this. I think the species is really, really important, and I agree about Bradford pears. We've been taking Bradford pears out of the city recently because they're invasive.
they're
and
awful.
Not wonderful.
But homeowners don't know that.
but-
Someone buys a new home, and this is my concern, and this is why I think having this as not just something that's punitive, but something that is supportive to new people moving in. I've been a new homeowner who didn't know that much about trees, but I knew enough to consult. I never went to a big box store and bought trees and put them in my yard. I always got a tree. I bought trees from a nursery and consulted with my environment and had the trees put in by professionals. And some people are going to do that, but not everyone is going to do that. And Janelle, so it would be really great to have, like I said, not just no, you cannot, but something here is
Well,
what you can do.
It's kind of like something that maybe this could, because I think what we're doing in this subcommittee, and I think Deborah and I talked, and I just want to make sure I'm on the right path, is looking to see what we have in code and looking to see what's missing.
Mhm.
And maybe that educational outreach to the public of, hey, if you're coming to the city, here's the suggested tree list
Mhm.
that the city encourages you to use. And hey, these are non-native. You really shouldn't be planting these. Maybe that's something that could come out of this subcommittee.
We actually
I'm sorry.
do have the Urban and Community Forestry Service from
Yes.
Delaware does have lists of trees. They make sure to remove trees that are not recommended because they're subject to disease, because they're too invasive, yada, yada. So that would be a starting point. It's always dangerous to have a list because you need diversity, and any list is going to tend to narrow your diversity.
And I think also
So-
something that we need to acknowledge is that this is a city that is not just green, but beautiful. And that sometimes the native species are limiting it to that we're going to be eliminating some really beautiful ornamental species that may thrive here in this environment. And we are,
Yeah, I will add this, even though the code requires me to lean towards natives, within the parks, I think we planted almost 100% natives. Certainly in the last 3-4 years, we planted all natives within the parks. But you're right, as far as street trees between the curb and the sidewalk, there's a limited number of trees that can thrive there. And the natives that would thrive there are not the natives you would want on your street. So we tend to go to other trees, non-natives for the street trees.
And that's maybe where, if
Yeah.
one of the items that's missing is brochure about, guidance on tree planting and what types of trees make sense and don't make sense. And and it's like, hey, by the way, don't forget, the city's responsible for the street trees. Don't prune the street trees.
Right.
That's the city's responsibility. Maybe something like that would
Some
be
things like
something
that.
that's missing that, we could put into maybe a policy or adopt through an ordinance.
Also, on the Urban Community Forestry website, there's a document called the Tree Owner's Manual. It's actually put out by the National Forestry Service, the Federal Forestry Service, and it has excellent advice on planting trees and mulching trees and all that.
yeah, because,
So if we could give that to every homeowner, that would be wonderful.
okay, I'm trying to.
I found that there's 2 things that you have to do when you plant a tree. If you make sure that you plant at the right depth, and in order to do that, you have to find the tree flare, or the root flare, which often is buried under several inches of dirt. If you do that, and also you take care of any circling roots, cut them out, that gives you your best chance of the tree thriving in the future. But
And also,
that's a level of detail we might not need there.
and
Yes.
also watering suggestions, because most people don't realize when you've got a new tree, you've got to water it frequently. So
That's absolutely right. In fact,
but-
at my request, the city gave us a water truck a few years ago,
Right.
and that's what we use.
Yeah, and if you're me, you need to know what your property is, because if it rains a lot, my backyard likes to hold water for a little bit.
Yeah.
So I'm not planting a tree back there that doesn't like water. It's gonna have to really like water, so it'll suck it up. So I need to know what tree. So,
Right tree,
Yeah.
right place.
yep, right tree, right
That's right.
place.
that's right.
Yeah. This is a very, I'll just keep talking.
Yep, it'll come on.
I think this is a really hefty task, and there are a lot of issues, larger even than my expertise can provide for. So I really do hope the word goes out that we like volunteers. What I don't want to do is cost taxpayers money to do this. I want to see if we can use the wealth of resources, which are tremendous, in our own community. I tend to be a very grassroots person, and so I want to get other people who care to come on in. And not to be too corny, but I taught elementary school, let's speak for the trees, and not just the trees that are standing, but the trees that will be standing, and hopefully will be standing, some of them, a century or 2 from now. And that's just, I think, would be one of my goals in this. I feel like with what you're talking about, you're opening my eyes to the whole can of worms. I know that, but I think all of this is really important. I think not just be about which trees cannot be cut down and removed, but also with the best practices. And I don't think there's anything wrong with, here's a list of preferred trees. Here's a list of non-preferred trees, and explaining to people that these trees, while they may be cheap and available at a big box store, may not be the trees that are going to add the best long-term value to your property.
Right. You want to list the invasive trees as ones.
Oh,
you don't
certainly.
want.
So a lot of that work has already been done for us to some extent. That, like I said, the state already has lists of preferred trees that they use for grant projects. They have lists of do not plant trees that are subject to disease or invasive.
And I wanted to check.
Let me add, look, I have never, for all of my grants, and they've all been approved by the state, we haven't necessarily taken trees off of that list, because if you just use that list, there's only a couple dozen trees on the list, whereas the universe of possible trees is much bigger. It gives a starting point for someone who doesn't know anything about trees. It's not necessarily the only suitable trees.
Right.
I mean, that's a list of thousands, actually. And so it's a good place to start if you wanted to give that to homeowners, but you shouldn't say that's the only trees you could ever plant if you come to us.
No, I think by using something that says preferred trees.
I like the right tree, right place.
Yeah,
And I know the conservation, the Sussex Conservation District actually has, hey,
yes.
they've got like trees and plants that are encouraged to be planted. So it sounds like we've got something that's missing we can add to the list of maybe this is something, and maybe it's not an ordinance, maybe it's just a policy or just some education that we do.
We
out
could
of the
actually put links
subcommittee.
on our website to the preferred trees list and the
Link
my plant
everything.
list.
I would hope that all of this would be online, because I am not a fan of loving trees. I am not a fan of printing up brochures and giving them to people in
And again,
2022, really.
again, we can do a brochure that's just literally online.
Yeah.
And we can always, again, if this
Well,
is
we
something that
We can
council
put
wants to move
links to
forward.
things that already exist.
Yep.
And I think what else is, and this is the danger of something like this. The more you think about it, the more ideas you get. But what's actually available locally? There are some good nurseries here. And, if trees are not available at some of the larger nurseries, they're probably not trees that people are going to be going to great lengths to bring in. And so I think looking at some of those things. Let's see if there was anything else. Is there anything else that you want to, go over from the actual code, Marty? I have it up in front of me. The definitions is really, really helpful. And I think, for example, starting with the small trees, medium trees, and large trees, using this as a basis makes a lot of sense. But I believe we also need to look at the caliper.
A lot of it depends on, are you talking about what trees we're going to protect? Is that what you're talking about?
Well, I'm
It all
just-
depends on what- See, okay, let me backtrack and say, the way the code uses this definition of small, medium, large is it says that, small trees can be planted no closer than 30 feet apart, medium 40 feet, large 50 feet. I have to tell you, under current thinking, these are not good guidelines under current thinking.
Okay.
Depending on the circumstances, if you want to create a grove, real groves of trees have trees closer together than this.
Right.
And I have planted groves closer together than this in Lewis. If you want a specimen tree, you might do it that way, but that's not necessarily thought to be the best way to plant trees. Trees like to be together.
Yeah.
In nature, they grow in groves.
So I just want to clarify for everybody in the room and listening. The Planning Commission has no jurisdiction over Chapter 177. And so it sounds like Marty might be going to Janet going, hey, maybe there's some things that maybe Parks and Rec should take a look at to fix that section of the code. But changes to 177 are something this group can't look at.
Right.
But I think what we can do is use some of what's in there as a jumping off point for the things that are missing elsewhere.
Well, the reason I'm mentioning it
Yep.
is if you're going to talk about how close together to plant trees, don't start with this.
Right. And that's why we want experts. I'm not sure how many times I can say this, but we want experts. And I'm wondering, does anyone have any suggestions for how I could get that word out better? Perhaps I need to write a letter to the editor and, in the Cape Gazette and seek that, or put it on the city website. Is that possible, Janelle?
There's a bunch of different things we can do. I think we can talk, so we're not taking up everybody's time, is that we can have a conversation about, if
Right.
there's people we want to reach out to. And I know Janet's got some resources and I've got some resources that we can do. Because I want to make sure everybody's, like Marty's given her overview, and then we can start kind of like,
Thank
okay,
you. You
what's
know that policing me in is probably a good idea, but
because I want to make sure we're staying on the agenda, so I don't get in trouble
Thank
with
you.
FOIA. And then,
but I also want to make sure that we're talking about everything out in public,
oh,
which,
absolutely.
is
Me
important to
giving-
me.
Us talking about resources that or Jan and I can reach out to say, hey, can you attend a meeting? That's not a problem. But I think, what we're trying to focus on today is
Getting
what
through
we
this.
have, and then we can start discussing what's starting to miss. So then we can focus on those sections of what maybe could turn into a policy or just outreach or potentially an ordinance.
And Marty, can I ask you a question? I'm looking down at 177-4 specification of planting. Here we have a section B, tree size. All trees shall conform to American Association of Nurserymen standards, be at least 1 1/4 inches to 1.5 inches to DBH.
Diameter of breast height.
Okay,
It's basically 4.5 feet high. In my case,
Okay,
it's
thank you.
diameter or chin height, but whatever.
And I live with the Vikings, so it's a different scale at my house altogether.
That's the
Um,
standard.
yeah.
Deborah, that's the standard. for it.
Okay.
Unless
See-
it's-
That's standard.
Unless it's a tree that has multiple branches and then you start lower.
Yeah.
Right? Isn't that right? Something like that.
More or less, yeah.
And I think this is an opportunity for a little bit of public education. You had mentioned about tree maintenance and, tree trimming, tree topping, pollarding. If you could just take a minute and explain for anybody who may be watching this later, what the city does do for trees versus what is the responsibility of homeowners, just so people.
Okay,
clear.
so as the city trees on city property that I mentioned before, the city takes care of pruning. We do not top trees. We do not commit crepe murder. We have our pruning done by a certified arborist. Topping and pollarding is basically you cut off all the tops and they look like a flat top tree sometimes. And that's not done.
And what about the BPW? Is there,
BPW does pruning for wire clearance to keep the trees away from the electric wires. And we don't have anything to do with that.
Right.
They do it.
and those are private trees often, or street trees both, I would
They're like-
imagine.
Have they ever been, yeah, I guess some of the street trees they do sometimes. Yeah, some of them they
Yeah.
do. They have. Actually, now that I'm thinking about it, talk about wrong tree, wrong place. We had some Norway maples planted on one of our streets and before I got on board, and there are wires overhead, and that's bad for lots of different reasons, but the BPW had actually pruned them quite harshly because they were getting into the wires. Well, Norway maples never should have been planted there. They get too tall and they're invasive, and so I ended up removing them. And so BPW will prune trees to keep them out of the wires. Now, my answer to that is I don't plant tall trees under wires. I only plant trees under wires that will stay short enough to not be a problem.
That
And
seems like
that's a
good
major-
practice
That's a big issue. I think
and good advice for homeowners as well.
good advice for homeowners. I think in Lewis, there's not a lot of homeowners that would have a tree in that position, but there are some.
Yeah, they did do private trees on
Yeah.
Kings Highway.
In Kingside. Okay.
Yes, they did. I remember
Yeah.
when they
Yeah.
did that. And
And typically, even if you're gonna plant trees in the street trees, you want to make sure they don't have a huge root system, so they don't get into the utilities that are
yeah,
underground.
obviously,
So yeah, there's a whole bunch of trees that actually fit those criteria. It's like, we're not too tall and we don't have the greatest, we're not going underground and gonna sprawl everywhere for the roots. So there are trees that are
but then
actually
again,
good for
those are sometimes
utilities.
the trees that absorb the most water, correct? And help us with other,
And again, it's all about the right place,
right.
right tree. I'm gonna steal that because I really like that.
Yeah, because we
Thank you.
have, that's the other thing is to it. And I'll only go briefly to this, but what neighborhoods I'm going to be paying more attention, overhead wires versus underground wires. Everything from Pilot Town Village out that direction has underground, right?
So all new BPW has been, if you're a new development, you're underground. Now,
And,
there
and
are-
let's define new, like how,
I don't know when they
Okay.
instituted going underground. That I do not know.
I'm thinking the 70s, because that's
It's quite
minor
possible.
underground.
But you're gonna find places that are older in the city, which
Right.
we have, that you're gonna find overhead utilities. So for electric, but don't forget your water and your sewer are underground and in somewhere in that street right of way area.
Right, so my neighborhood is above ground.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
So that's something that's going to be a drive around project that I'm going to have to take on to myself and get to know that a little bit more.
Marty, do you have anything about volcano mulching?
Oh, my gosh, volcano mulching.
I know about that.
I don't know if it's in the code, but we certainly tell we have a continuing discussion with our contractor that does the mulching to
Yeah.
not do that. And we educate people whenever we get the chance.
Yeah, because I have street trees that were planted by the previous owners, and every time they come to mulch, I have to go back and spread
Yes,
it all
take it
out.
all away. Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's also education for homeowners who think that's the way to do it because they like the aesthetic. Yeah.
Well, and they see it everywhere, so
Yeah.
they assume it's correct and it's not. Yeah, that's a good.
Yeah, and if we have new developments coming in this neighborhood, what are the odds that's going to be the case?
Yeah.
Well, the good thing is for street trees, if they're required in a new development or a landscape buffer, they're providing, a landscape architect is actually signing and sealing those landscape plans for new developments. And they're providing the tree planting diagrams for planting. So they know they're not going to volcano mulch that, and they're providing another number of different things.
Well, I'm just wondering, do we actually know that?
Yes.
Not all landscape architects are created equal, or
No,
equally
because-
qualified.
Let me say right now, there's a very huge difference between what the landscape architect puts on paper
And what-
actually happens in real life.
Yes,
I have been on
agreed.
plantings, I've been on plantings where there's a certified arborist present from the commercial nursery. And they're interested in slamming the tree in the ground and walking away, and we have to stand over them and make sure they do it correctly. And they will volcano mulch because it's easy and quick, and they, so, yeah, what's on paper is good, but continued vigilance by people who know what they're doing is required.
And guidelines for planting, obviously,
Yep.
that should never be occurring, but I don't know what percentage of the population is aware of that.
Small percentage, but the tree owner's manual that I told you about has all that in there
Right.
about mulching and.
I
watering.
can say this because I got some trees planted I'll give a personal anecdote from Waterloo Gardens, who is now out of business. So I can safely say that, but they're respected enough in Pennsylvania as being really a wonderful garden, and they were. But my tree surgeon who did all our tree maintenance had a fit, and when he came out and saw how the mulch was done, and this is how I learned the hard way, that they were planted right trees in the right place because they were under a canopy. But there's an example that someone who you would have thought really would have done a great job planting, when it actually came down to the people going out and planting the trees, it wasn't. So I think even though we do have requirements in the code, and particularly the new major subdivision code, for trees and for the landscape plan, and we all look at it on LPC, and council looks at it some as well, the actual work that goes into that, we have to make sure that things are planted correctly too.
Yeah, and we do that when we
Okay.
have to go out and do an inspection. We are making sure things are, it might happen every once in a while, things get away from us, but we are, trying to make sure everything is in compliance.
Okay, great. And that's the thing is, if there's no guidelines for the actual planting, then you don't have as much authority to be able to say,
Oh,
this
no,
is how we want it planted.
staff has a stamped and sealed plan, and that plan is also required to be on site. So we go out, we've got a copy, either paper copy or the electronic copy on our computers, and we'll go out and we can make sure, like, you planted the wrong tree, or, you planted trees somewhere else so we try to be vigilant and make sure when development happens, things are planted and built and done in the right manner.
Okay,
And remember,
Yeah,
what I just
okay.
told you is just what's in the code for the city trees. It doesn't have anything to do with private trees, so,
yes, of course.
yeah.
So that actually transfers really nicely into chapter 170, which is the subdivision code. And the subdivision code has requirements for landscape buffers and the planting of trees in a new development. And I think a lot of that, the concerns that have been brought up have been addressed in that section of code about the types of trees, because that went from like being a paragraph to being a couple of pages long.
Yes.
And Marty graciously provided some really great feedback. So we took that in the city.
Yes, we
took
did.
that
We
in.
absolutely did. At
Absolutely,
the
yeah.
workshop.
So I think a lot of that has been addressed for if the city has plantings of trees in new developments and plantings that require landscape buffer. So I think we have those. So we've got city street trees covered. We've got landscape buffers covered. We've got maintenance that is covered. There are sections of code. I know you asked about who prunes and trims the city trees. And if it's a private tree that's overgrowing the city's right of way, the property owner is responsible for doing that. And we've got a code enforcement officer who's going to go out, and it's like, if it's, if it's, you can't walk under that tree, they're going to give you a letter and go, hey, you need to cut that back. And we've got that section in code. So that's also covered in code. So, so
And,
that's what we have. in existing code.
and it's
Yeah.
not like you don't have tons of work to do, but just to make sure that we're being comprehensive, can you email me and I'll pass it on? Oh, you've given me the list already. Thank you.
No, I have, I started a list of the chapters that reference to
Everything
trees.
that's applicable that we need to examine.
And again, the only things that this committee has control over is chapter 197 and chapter 170. But we can take a look and see what's missing and then go make, hey, maybe there should be a new chapter, or, add something to chapter 197. Because we do have an environmental section that could be added there
Yes.
regarding trees or something like that.
Yes. My real gut with this, though, is that we really do, in order to satisfy complexity that's going to be involved here and the public's desire for this, I think we do need specifically a tree ordinance. And I personally think it's going to have to apply to private trees too.
What is in the tree? I've seen tree ordinances that protect heritage big trees, that protect certain species of trees, that protect certain trees in certain locations. Now, when you say a tree ordinance, obviously you're talking about trees on private
On private
property.
property.
What is it that you think we need to protect about those trees?
This isn't my vision. This is, our vision. So I personally would think where I would probably be zoning in is protecting, I don't know if we would call them preservation trees or heritage trees. What is the correct term? Heritage trees?
I've seen all kinds of terms in different
Okay.
cat codes, so we have to come up with
Specimen trees, yes. Yeah, I think we need to protect those trees. But we need to define within this committee what falls under that.
In my mind, the ginkgo tree that's on the Verdon's property, no, that's not a native tree, but that is massive. It's a specimen tree. That's something, I looked at the big trees in Delaware. Lewis has one listed. It's a hackberry on the cemetery in Pilot Town Road. That's the only tree that's qualified as big trees.
Which cemetery?
The one on Pilot Town Road.
The one at the end or
Yeah.
the closer one?
It's
one-
next to Ocean View Boulevard.
Okay, that one. All right,
Yeah.
because there's two.
But there are so many huge, big trees that I think, maybe we want to focus on the big trees that could be a Delaware big tree or a champion tree or something like that. What do you think, Marty?
Well, I will, just as to the ginkgo on the Verdon's property, I'm pretty sure that's the tree they are protecting. They submitted an application for
Right.
subdividing, and they went out of their way to protect that and arrange the construction.
Right,
to
but I'm
protect that.
just pointing that
Yeah.
out as the size of the tree. And there's also a massive beech tree there too. That's gorgeous. But
Near, which is a
beech
near
on the Verdon property,
on the Verdon.
near
Okay.
the ginkgo.
And Rich has joined us. He's been here a little bit.
Oh, hi, Rich. Yeah, we're just trying to go through. I can fill you in privately on everything that we covered, or you can watch on Zoom too. On YouTube later. I think looking at some of those obvious trees is important, but what about the next, kind of level down, the trees that are developing and growing and if left and maintained properly are going to be those specimen trees of the future. I would imagine that size is an issue, but also is varietal
Mhm.
play part in this?
Yeah.
And is it a rarity? Do you look at rarity or do you look at what thrives? Or do you look at a combination of both?
I think you look at both, but I was saying, step one might be the specimen trees. Step two, maybe the ones you were just talking about that are potentially the next generation of specimen trees.
And then maybe step 3 is the guidance for the public in planting trees that are going to be the specimen trees of the future. We can't go around and say, well, you've made bad choices about the trees on your property. You need to remove them all. Obviously they are what they are. And the things that really aren't well suited are not going to survive long-term anyway, correct? Would that be fair unless they're invasive?
I'm not sure what you mean by not well suited. Something like a Norway maple will grow like crazy, but it's not well suited. We don't want them.
We don't want
Bradford pear grows like crazy, but I don't consider that well suited. So
Right. Well, Bradford pear though is also is not long lived. It's not going to be.
it's not, the individual tree is not all that long lived, but it will put out seedlings forever and you'll have it.
Oh, yeah.
forever.
Okay.
We're having trouble getting rid of it and eradicating it in George H.B. Smith Park. We have a contractor now that's helping with us with controlling invasives, and it's a nonstop problem because the seedlings keep coming up. Even though we've gotten rid of the big trees, the seedlings keep coming up.
Well, I do want to give you an opportunity to make sure that you've covered everything that you want to address here. One of my goals today was to just hear some ideas and then make me think more, and I certainly have.
Oh,
Could I just raise one point there, apropos your point there, is a big part of this, of course, is education. This is all environmental education that we're engaged in here, especially on private property.
Yep.
But one of the great thing about native plants, and one of the clients that I've worked with for going on 20 years now is the Garden Club of America, which is a wonderful, storied organization with a history well over 100 years, going back to the redwoods. But native plants are take less maintenance. They are better adapted to the environment that they find themselves in. There are myriad benefits to native plants. They are better for pollinators. They are better for the soil. They're better for climate change. On and on and on. They're all these benefits. Non-natives, of course, are different than invasives, as you guys well, you understand that a lot better than I do. But but educating folks on this, and then another crucial step here is educating a key constituency here, which is the local nurseries. I got a couple of trees. I got a red bud recently from Peppers, which is just out in Milton, which is a very good nursery, by the way. But even they, I think, could stand some education because so many people get their plants and trees from there, and that becomes just a key constituency in terms of.
That is actually something that we did start to touch upon. And we were talking about, natives and versus non-natives, which I know is a much longer decision, but we did spend a lot of time here talking about not just a tree ordinance being punitive, but a tree ordinance being educational and supportive. And
Right.
I think that is something that everyone seemed to be embracing, and I think it's important. We have just 1 hour today. Is that correct, Janelle?
Yes.
So I want to make sure that Marty just is able to, did you cover everything that you were able?
Pretty much. I would like to add those to natives. I've had lots of different advice from lots of different experts on this. So I had one expert tell me, we got to be thinking about things that are native in south of here because of climate change, things in South Carolina. One expert even mentioned Florida, which scares me a little bit,
Yeah.
but don't plant any sugar maples right now. Okay. Another thing I would like to mention too, though, I had the arborist from Cornell. I was in a lecture by her, and she actually said it's not exactly true that all natives are less maintenance, and it's tree by tree by tree as to what's lowest maintenance, what's easiest to grow, what will last the longest. So I think we have to keep our mind open. Natives are great. I plant a lot of them, but they're not the only answer to every problem.
Well, I want to bring up something that's not native, I imagine, but is, it's a fall under tree or shrub, but camellias are trees, correct? They fall under trees?
They're usually shrubs, but camellia, I generally, the
Sometimes
horticulture.
they're very large.
The biological difference between tree and shrub is nothing. It's, horticulturists call it a shrub when it's maybe up to 12 or 15 feet. They
Okay.
call it a tree when it's bigger, except for if it has a lot of trunks, maybe they'll call it a
Well,
shrub.
some
So
camellias grow taller than 12 and 15 feet, but
Yeah.
I think that's an example of,
I think,
we're zone 7A. So to me, it was exciting when I could move here and have camellias.
Right.
And I think the camellias are something that beautifies this city at unexpected times of the year, and that they are truly a beautifying tree in Lewis. I did join the American Camellia Society, and just it's something that I think is an asset that we have many of them, and we have large, but that going down to more southern trees. When I bought camellias, I've purchased them from the Camellia Forest in North Carolina, and consulted with them that it's 7A and we're coastal, and they've thrived. And so I think being open-minded and looking at the aesthetics and also consulting experts and educating people to consult experts is important.
So what I'm hearing is, because I know we're at 3, so I'm gonna try to bring it back to what I'm hearing is maybe the next meeting, we finalize what we have, and then we start a discussion of like what's missing. And I've already got like 3 options of what you guys think is missing. And then if we can finalize that, maybe we can get you onto a workshop for mayor and council, go, okay, these are the options we think are missing. What does council want this group to focus on? And then if they determine like, okay, we want to go this way or that way, then bring in those experts and start working on that.
Right.
Does that sound?
I don't know that we're going to get that nailed down in one more meeting, but
I'm
I think in 2,
positive.
it's realistic. I do think, I didn't hear any kickback on, it's obvious that we need to be addressing trees on private property, because we're already addressing the trees on public property. And I know that people do have some concerns about that. And I'm sure down the pike, we will be hearing some concerns about that. But in order to preserve the environment and keep ourselves a healthy tree canopy, I think we need to move forward in that direction. And I want to see if there's any objection within the group on that. And I want to give a shout over here to Joe and to Rich. I'm not talking about unbridled. I'm talking about within reason.
And again, this is a concept that'll go to council, and they're
Of
gonna
course it
say,
will.
yes, no, or other.
I think you can try to influence private property, but you're walking on thin ice, and it's just something that the way Lewis operates, it's basically, the code changes are okay as long as it doesn't affect me. It's got to affect the other guy, so you can try, float some ideas and see what happens.
Okay. And, I think, Joe, the devil is going to be in the details on this too, is how far you're going to take it. And having supportive guidelines, how can anyone object to that? You want your neighbor, like if the house next door to you sells, you want someone to come in and plan it responsibly. So the details are going to be extremely important. Richard, or
let me offer another issue. If we're talking about protecting certain, especially large heritage trees, specimen trees, what have you, there may be other ways other than code changes. And I raised this with the mayor several years ago, and it didn't go anywhere. But what I understand is there are some local governments that will lease a tree from a homeowner so that the city becomes responsible for maintaining the tree, pruning it, what have you. The homeowner agrees they won't do anything to damage the tree. And then the city, of course, gets the liability for that tree. But it's a way of protecting the tree and preserving the tree without having a code that requires the homeowner to do anything. Now you have to have a cooperative homeowner that's willing to sign the lease, and you have to have a city that's willing to maintain that tree, but
And I have to go as devil's advocate on this, having had a tree fall on my house. If the tree falls on a house, who's holding the bag at that point, though? That's what would scare me.
Delaware, I think it's Delaware law that whoever the tree falls on, that owner is responsible for getting it taken.
That's true, because even if it's your neighbor's tree that falls on you,
You have.
you
yeah.
still, yes.
that's pretty much the way it is on the.
Okay.
A family member who had his house crushed by a tree, yeah. that's-
Okay. Okay. Yes, you're right. You're right. And the other thing I'm thinking with that, is perhaps something like, offering people historic tree designations. I'd also love to see that with houses outside the historic district, have homeowners be able to seek their own. But these are good talking points.
I think that's a great idea, Marty. I really do. Because it takes the enforcement out if you were going to set up a code.
Yeah.
It's positive, and then the city will maintain it.
That's something that we could definitely bring up to mayor and city council. It also does take on a major expense for the city, though.
Well, I don't know how major it is. I mean, we already take care of over 1,000 trees, so.
Yeah, there we
Now,
go.
Some of the heritage trees are really big, they cost more to maintain, but.
They're
compared
worth
to
it.
What the kind of issues we have, as you say, we try to tell people what to do on their own homes, on their own property. I don't know. I think it would be less expensive, frankly.
One last thing, if we possibly could. How tight are we?
You've got a few minutes.
Okay, could we take 5 minutes and screen share the Arbor scan so that people can actually see, if they go back, the Arbor scope, pardon me, how this works? And because I've been playing with it and I thought it was really fantastic. I could just get up here with the old pointer and do it this way. But, all right, one thing I wanted, okay. Can you see it better when you're when you're beside it?
Yes. Here, let me. That should help.
Okay. As I like to joke, I taught special ed, I can read anything. All right, so down here it shows the good, fair, poor, and dead trees. But Janelle, if you would click on some sample trees, perhaps at Marty's direction.
That's fine, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it gives you the common name and the scientific name and the age class and the condition class. And
Marty, it has a number.
they all
Are
have
they
numbers.
tagged?
They have little brass tags on them that has the number.
Yes, I do know about that. Yes, they are
Yeah.
tagged because I've seen some of those tags.
Now, these are just on city property.
Right.
That's,
So I'm noticing that a lot of is that 4th?
that's 4th Street.
Okay, and so let's zoom out a little bit and see where do we have trees?
Yeah, why don't you zoom all the way out so we see all the city trees?
This is concerning because what I see is where we don't have any trees.
Well, those aren't, so remember, there are a lot of trees in Pilot Town Village up there,
Yes,
but Pilot
Which
Town
is
Village
right
does
up
not have any sidewalks, so we
this
don't have any
section.
trees between the sidewalk and the curb.
right, okay.
So, but there's a lot of trees in Pilot Town Village. They just aren't city trees.
And you actually answered a question for me, having living on Harbor View Road. I always wondered who maintained the circles. I always thought it was good neighbors. I
So
do.
here's my story about Harbor View Road. They
I
were
thought
not
it was
inventoried.
It was probably mowing it, honestly.
During the original inventory, they were not inventoried, and I just found out a few months ago that they were city trees, so they are now inventoried.
Great,
And if you zoom into Harbor View Road, you'll
right
see.
there, yep.
So I now inventory them, and the city does mow the grass, although I understand some neighbors do some self-help sometimes, but
Yeah,
the city, it's on the city mowing schedule.
okay, and yeah, I do think so. All right, so it would be really great. My dream would be to see all of these specimen trees in the city on this, and obviously that would be a count, and a lot of that count might need to be voluntary and a campaign, but I'm picturing something like, hashtag Lewis tree count, like the great bird count, and get people involved in planting these trees, because what the statistic that I can't get out of my head here is the tree canopy numbers, the 34% in 2018, 2019. I want to see what it is now, and the goal of 38%.
So the most, I did actually check while you guys were talking, that is the most recent information from the state.
Yeah, I assumed it was that.
It is. I'm told they're working on a new count, but I don't know when it'll come out. Like, I can see if I can find out.
But I would really encourage, if there's anybody who's watching this, coming back and watching this on YouTube, is to go explore this arbor scope and look at the trees in your own neighborhood. I didn't know this resource existed. So thank you for that.
It's been on our website for a long time, but
No,
I know.
So right here, education
Education.
is,
So next meeting, when would you guys like to get together?
well, when are we available? And I'm also not opposed to scheduling the next two.
Okay.
I don't know if anybody else feels that way, but I like scheduling two out. And then I want to again put out the call. I have gotten, to see if there are others who would be interested in serving on this subcommittee. And that does not necessarily mean coming to every meeting. We can bring people in since they're ex officio as needed. Or we can have people who come and participate in every meeting. And I would, I'd be happy to talk to anyone who'd like to do that.
So we have Monday, the 18th available. Next week it's kind of hard because the earliest we could do is next Thursday, and that's a busy day because we have to post an agenda a week out.
Right.
So we're looking really at the week of the 18th, Monday in the afternoon is good.
There's a Parks and Rec meeting at 6:30, so
Yes, so-
can't miss that.
Nope,
And what day of the week is that one?
that is a Monday.
That's Monday.
Okay. Oh, am I saying? Yes. Okay.
So does that work?
That does work for me. Does that work?
Works for me. What time would you?
Is there, Janelle, don't we have a special planning session at 6 o'clock or something? We were looking at that at one point.
Six Parks and Rec meeting, so we'd have to have it before that.
Yeah, it would be, if it's okay, an afternoon meeting, is that
You could do
doable?
4:35. I just
Fi-
don't get into Parks and Rec.
5 would be the earliest that I could do, and I do want to be there. So 5 o'clock on the 18th looks like a possibility for me. Marty, could you be there? Marty, you are such a great resource. I love having you around. You know your stuff.
Stop at 6 o'clock so everybody can people can get to the Parks and Rec meeting.
Well,
6
What-
o'clock would be good.
we have both meetings in the same location, so we don't have running in between.
Okay, I can do that.
Either both at the Rollins or both here, whichever works.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Because
Okay, then let's have it at Rollins.
too many members to fit around the table. Okay, and then do you want to do the week after that as well?
No.
Okay, so we're looking at the first week in August.
Okay.
We can do Monday again, which is the 1st.
I may not be here yet. Do we like Mondays? Is that are Mondays good? Okay,
Good
we
for
could do
me.
it in the late in the afternoon. And Rich, you were not available during the 9 to 5 hours, because generally these subcommittees, can you participate with Zoom?
Which day was
We
that?
usually meet during the days on the subcommittees
August 1st,
because
but she said
August
no. And that August 8th does not work because that is a council.
no,
day,
August
so-
1st, if we did it in the late afternoon, is not necessarily. a
Oh,
no.
okay. I just wasn't sure. So-
Yeah, but go ahead. Don't let me be the holdup
Would
though.
you
And
be able to join us though on Zoom? Is that, I don't want to.
Zoom is more possible. Yeah, because
Okay.
I might be in DC then.
But we can still do 5 o'clock
Um,
on the 1st. Does that sound good to everybody? I'm looking.
Good.
Okay.
Possible for August 1st. That looks possible.
Janelle here.
Yes.
Okay.
So the next one will be at the Rollins Center, and then August 1st will be here.
Okay.
And I'll get that on the city calendar, so we get on the calendar.
Okay, super.
And what time, August 1st again, just to be clear on that one?
We're gonna
5
do 5
p.m.
o'clock.
5 o'clock, good, okay.
At what time on the 18th?
We're gonna do 5 o'clock.
5 o'clock, Rollins, okay.
And I just want to close just by saying that I like the direction that Marty was seeming to go. And that was, and I don't want to put words in people's mouths, but finding an incentive, incentivizing people to put, good trees, with the right tree in the right place onto their property. You can't tell them, of course, but if we could find where the city is helping to maintain it, some kind of an incentive. I like that.
What you have to say is it increases your property value.
Yeah, exactly, Joe. Yeah.
Actually, that was something that I mentioned at the beginning. And I like the, preferred, I think a lot of it has to always be semantics. People like to be asked to do things voluntarily. So preferred versus, discouraged is probably going to be more embraced than trees you can plant, trees you cannot plant.
Right. People don't
But
like the words
property values
cannot.
And the aesthetics and protecting, the benefits of trees, protecting the land that we've got and holding the land, I think is a
Right.
critical issue here. And that's, for me, a guiding issue. And we need to keep that as a guiding principle.
Here.
I actually did end up with, it's not really a question.
Okay, let's see if I can answer it.
Sorry, Aaron Mushrush with the Cape Gazette. So a couple of weeks ago, there was actually a house on the corner of Missouri and Cedar Street.
Yes.
I can actually show you the picture if you would like.
Okay,
You'll see that nice, really big tree that's there. That is a house that's located on Lewis Beach. That tree is no longer there. I actually have pictures of them doing the work on it. And I guess that's kind of what I was wondering. Is this tree subcommittee possibly going to be looking at people that are removing trees like that from their property? Because my first thought was, okay, you have flooding on Cedar Street. Why are you removing a tree that would be able to take up that? Then my next thought was, that tree is so close to the house. Do they have storms? Is that a danger to the house? So it's not necessarily a question, but I am pointing out the fact that there was a tree recently removed on Cedar Street, Missouri Avenue, and just wanted to know what the thoughts were from the committee about trees like that on private property.
well, thank you for the hot seat question for the first one of the subcommittee. I'll jump right in. If we're going to be setting up standards for trees that we're going to try to protect, the answer would be yes, we're going to be trying to protect trees. But on the other hand, sometimes a tree is a hardship because people feel that it is a danger to their home, or it might be a danger to their home. So I would imagine that we're going to be setting up something procedurally within this so that homeowners can present if there is a hardship. But if the hardship is, putting your garage here where the specimen tree is versus 15 feet over, I don't think that's a hardship. I think that's a choice. And if we're doing a tree ordinance, we're doing a tree ordinance. It's going to be my answer to that question.
Yeah, I think all the details are yet to be determined because this is the first meeting.
Thank you for the political answer, Janelle.
We're gathering information, looking at what we have. I think we'll also look what we have and what other places have next meeting and start looking into what is missing.
Yes.
Does that sound?
Yeah, that is, if we can go with some homework assignments, which the email that I sent out made it clear that all homework assignments are voluntary in this committee. But one of the things that we're going to need to be looking at, we're going to need tree experts and, and tree regs, but also existing governments and comparable. The obvious is we're going to look at Rehoboth, but I don't think we should limit ourselves to only looking in Delaware. I think in particular, we should though look perhaps at other coastal communities. Are there even along the Chesapeake Bay communities that have tree ordinances?
And we can compare them and then look for gaps.
Yeah. And also get into the legalese of it of, have their tree ordinances held up and what tree ordinances have not held up. So, is there anyone who would like to, and it can be more than one person, it could be all of us. Is there anyone who would like to, do research in that particular area?
Me, I would.
Okay, thank you. Mary Linda's going to be our other tree ordinances resource. And I'm sure I'll be Googling it, 3 a.m. too.
Okay.
Thank you very much. I didn't mean for the hard question. It was just something.
No, it's all right.
We're
It's-
talking about private, and thank you very much for the well thought out answer.
The hard questions are the ones that actually start good conversations, always.
Thank you.
So I guess, are there any other questions or comments before we close out?
I sent a Q&A into the computer, if Janelle could read it. And there might be another one in there.
And Joe is always really brilliant for just sending us a lot of resources. So thank you, Joe. Keep them coming.
Okay. Anyway,
To find out from the BPW
Yeah.
how deep the sewer and electric line are buried along the curb.
well, yeah, when you're planting trees, you don't want to hit the sewer lines or electric lines.
Oh, the digging, absolutely, the digging before.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so a standard for utilities is you want to stay 5 feet away from any utilities for the planting of a tree. The depth is going to depend on many different things. Not all utilities are at the same depth. And your water line and your sewer line are going to be not right next to each other. They're going to be separated. So it all depends on the depth that they need, especially for sewer to get that to move and for the water to move. So depth is going to depend wherever you are in the city.
Right.
Always have utilities come out, and if they put a line there, we don't plant a tree there. Doesn't matter. We just don't.
Yeah. And most owners do that, homeowners do that, but not all do.
Okay.
See, I do think that's important. So any other questions or comments?
I would like to make available links to these things I've talked about, the lists of trees from the state, et cetera. How do I do that?
Janet or myself, and we can get them on the website, and we can kind of do like a little notice that things have been added to the website so people have access to it.
Which website?
You want whatever
Could it be the-
websites, we
Could
can
it be the-
provide
the
links.
Parks and Rec website? Because I can put them up there.
Yeah,
Okay.
if that's what you want to
I
do.
would
go
actually
for it.
love to see, let's start a page for the tree subcommittee
Yeah, we usually do.
workshop.
And
And
then I can always link to the.
Well, I was
Parks and
thinking we
Rec
ought to put it
page.
up on the Parks and Rec website anyway, but
and then I'd also like to see things on there, like Mary Linda's looking for codes, for adding codes. And Janelle, if you want me to help with that, I am fairly adept with web management,
I
adding,
do it a lot.
I know, I do too.
So, by the way, you lost Rich.
I know I did. I know
I
we
just
did.
wanna
We're
know.
all right. So the other thing is just procedurally, as this is a subcommittee, do I need a motion
You need a
to,
motion to adjourn, and then I'm gonna need a volunteer to do minutes.
that's what I was going to ask about next. All right. Mr. Hoffner, I'm going to ask you to make that motion.
Oh. I move that we close discussion at 3:26 PM today until the next meeting.
I second that motion. And meeting
can't
adjourned.
exactly have a vote now, can you?
Yeah, there's 2 of us.
2 out of the 3, you're good.
Yeah, no, we don't need to vote. We don't vote on the adjournment. And then as far as minutes, I hate being a secretary, but I assumed I would be doing the minutes.
Good.
Shoot me now, but
I can help you.
no, I'm fine with it, but it's good. It'll make me organize my notes too.